The old forest was in front of them like a dark emerald wave, and the wind in the evening made the trees move. Sarah Williams pulled on the strap of her backpack even tighter and looked into the darkness. She hesitated at the edge, where the dense pines gave way to a vast, mysterious green. Jake called out from ahead, "Come on. Scaredy, Cat, you're the one who wanted to prove herself." Sarah gave him a mean look. Jake seemed eager to show he was still in charge ever since her uncle died. Even though she cared about him, his constant jabs made her angry. Still, this was her chance to forget about the times she had failed. She rushed to catch up to Jake and Aiden as they walked down a road that wound through the trees. The trees closed in around them and blocked out the light. Sarah's hair stood on end as she heard strange calls coming from the darkness. She turned her head back and thought she saw eyes shining in the almost darkness. But all she saw were empty shadows between the trees. Aiden stopped quickly as he went around a bend. "There," he said, pointing over there. Sarah could see worn-down stone walls rising like a half-collapsed wreck through the thick trunks. Many years of use had worn down the arches and columns, and vines grew over them, bearing quiet witness to everything that happened inside. As soon as Sarah knew what they had found, she got a chill. There were rumors that there was a huge stone maze buried deep in these woods that was made a long time ago, and then forgotten about. Few people had gone inside and come back to talk about what secrets or dangers they thought might be hidden in the narrow passages. "Well, don't all talk at once," Jake said with a crooked grin as he pushed past them toward the falling door. "Jake, wait," Aiden warned, his dark eyes warily scanning the ruins. "There's a reason no one comes here. We should leave it be." Jake threw back and denied Sarah her dare, and looked at her thoughtfully. Sarah let out a sigh. Giving up now would make her look even more like a coward. Still, as she looked into the entrance's pitch black mouth, she felt uneasy because she knew there was an unknown danger inside. This wasn't a normal test of bravery. She was sure there was evil here, like someone or something was hidden and planning. Jake was already inside, and his flashlight was moving along the mossy walls. Sarah forced herself to push past the cold stones and into the depths of the maze, where it went from dusk to complete darkness. When the walls got close together, their crazy design turned off to the side at impossible angles. Aiden reluctantly followed, pulling them deeper into the chaos. As Sarah's eyes got used to the light, she could make out intricate carvings in the stone that showed strange alien designs and scenes that were too worn down to be clearly seen. Whatever old people lived here has been lost to history. Low whispers came from the walls and told them they would go crazy if they stayed in this dark underworld for too long. Up ahead, Jake's flashlight played over a different set of paths that split off. "Chicken out," he teased, giving Sarah a goofy grin. Sarah prepared herself and looked back at him with a straight face. "No, but we shouldn't linger after dark. Let's find our way back before full night." Jake gave a shrug and ran ahead, taking the left path right away. Aiden stopped to think about their choices. His calm, thoughtful look was a source of comfort. Stay close. There may be more to this place than meets the eye. With that ominous note, they went deeper into the maze, not realizing the terrible things that were waiting for them in the shadows. The maze passageways turned and turned and turned and turned again and again, making a crazy knot of stone. It had been an hour, and there was still no sign of the way out. Sarah stayed close to Aiden and was grateful for his support as her worry grew. Jake had walked ahead, his flashlight moving back and forth through the ruins like a will. Oh, the wisp. His whoops and hollers were mockingly echoed back, as if to make fun of how slowly they were moving. Stranger sounds started to answer, like short, crackling cries that made Sarah's hair stand on end. She looked at Aiden with worry, but didn't say anything because she didn't want to scare Jake. It was getting dark, and the maze got tighter, trapping them in a dark, cramped jail. Strange sounds were coming from the walls, as if the ruins were moving in the growing darkness. When Jake's light didn't come back around another turn, Sarah's fear grew. She called out, "Jake," and her voice echoed through the tunnels. There was only quiet. Behind them, there was scuttling that made my skin crawl. Aiden turned, and the beam cut through the darkness to reveal. She grabbed his arm and felt her heart race. "Please, let's get out of here." Before Aiden could answer, Jake yelled a warning nearby, and then Sarah heard a scream that made her blood boil. They all ran down the closest passageway and emerged in the middle of a small room. Sarah held back a cry as Aiden's flashlight slowly went out. Jake got down on his knees among the rocks and held a limp body in his arms. There was blood on the flagstones from many cuts on the skin that was showing. Jake choked and said, "It." Aiden put his hand on Sarah's shoulder to warn her and then knelt next to her body. After a long, sad moment, he looked into their wide eyes. "He's gone." With one hand over her mouth, Sarah tried not to cry. An old friend of Jake's who had joined their dare was lying on the ground, torn and smashed in front of them. His lifeless eyes showed that he was dying. A growl from a wild animal echoed down the tunnel, making the hair on the dead body stand up in a bloody halo. Heavy footsteps ran up to them on all fours. Jake yelled back and slammed into Sarah as a huge, pale figure charged into the room. It was lit for a split second by the failing flashlight. It was a twisted, misshapen thing that looked more like a beast than a person, with matted fur and arms and legs that were too long. As it came up to the stones, its fingers curled into talons, and it scratched at them with its yellowed teeth. In a hurry, Jake pulled Sarah down the other path. Aiden was even faster, and he hit his shoulder on a piece of falling wall. An avalanche of dust and stones crashed into the opening, stopping the monster's charge. "Run!" he yelled, turning around to run after them into the darkness. Behind them, howls of rage could be heard hitting the wall as the hunter raged to kill its prey. As the flashlight went out, they ran away without looking, relying on Aiden's steady direction. They fell into complete darkness with a left turn, and then 2 rights. Their steps echoed like a death knell in front of and behind them. As the night got darker, everyone became very quiet. But Sarah had a feeling that they were not alone. From the walls, eyes watched, and more footsteps joined the hunt. After one last tunnel, they came out into a room with high ceilings and broken columns all over the place. Sarah huddled with Jake and Aiden, straining her eyes uselessly into the black, trying to hold her heavy breath. There was a lot of silence around them. In the deep, shadows moved slowly as they thought about what to do. They were now being played with by the hunter, who was enjoying its prey. They ran without looking and fell into a trap. There was no light left to help them get out. The ruins were completely dark. Sarah stared pointlessly into the darkness, her limbs shaking wildly. Jake's rough breathing next to her showed that he was losing his cool. Aiden was the only one who stayed strong and quietly thought about their situation. He said, "We need light. Since phones are dead, make a flashlight. Right away, before." Heavy footsteps could be heard far away in the maze. They were coming closer slowly. Sarah fumbled with her Zippo lighter while Jake tore pages out of his notebook and tried desperately to light them. Finally, a tiny spark came to life, casting an orange halo around the drawn faces. Aiden made his point clear. 2 lefts. It can't keep track of all of us at once because we split up. Stop when you reach a stone. 3 times. The real hunter, though, had already picked up on their smell. As Aiden counted down, the only sound they heard was the whoosh of air being pushed around. Jake then disappeared with a scream of pain and was dragged kicking into the dark. Sarah ran away on instinct, with only the fading flashlight to guide her. Aiden yelled from behind, and something heavy hit the stone with a terrible crack. She ran through the maze without looking as the shooter closed in for the kill, clutching her lighter like a charm. She went left and down a narrow path that ended in loose rock. With her heart racing, she climbed up the rocky hill and into another room with high ceilings. In the light that came and went, there were paintings and symbols all over the walls. It was said that strange pictures showed lost ages, but no one knows what they mean. In the middle of the room stood a broken statue of an alien god with cold obsidian eyes that looked ahead. The statue had no hair or sex. Sarah quickly looked for another way out when she heard a low growl reverberating up the tunnel. When her lighter went out, she was completely in the dark. She stood still in fear and looked into space, even though she knew the hunter was only a few feet away. A slight scuff woke her up, and heavy, musk-filled breath swept over her neck. She screamed and kicked out without thinking, and her heel hit the ground. The hunter howled in pain and anger, and the sound mixed with Sarah's scared cries as it bounced off nearby walls. She ran through the dark without any way to see where she was going. She relied only on luck and gut as people followed her with their skittering steps. Luckily, her flailing hand hit crumbling mortar and she fell through. She bounced off the rough-hewn tunnel walls as the hunter's claws scampered behind her. As her bile rose, she ran forward, relying only on her senses. She hoped that the maze would hide her smell and give her another chance to escape. She went off in a million different directions and lost all sense of where she was going. Finally, her foot got caught on a loose brick, and she fell hard to the ground, letting out a painful whoosh of air. No one knew how long she lay there gasping for air, or how far the shooter kept track of her as she fell and stumbled through the dark. Finally, there were heavy shifts in the shadows behind them again, and the chase began its steady march. Sarah stumbled as she tried to get up by leaning against the wall. Her lighter was lost, and so were her friends. They were all lost in this impossible maze. Only perseverance and blind instinct were left to help her walk through the growing darkness. In the never-ending maze, time stopped having any value. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, so she couldn't say how long she was lost. Arms and legs that didn't want to moved forward only because she was so tired and determined to live. Then, in the distance, a glow began to appear, drawing her in like a moth. As Sarah came out of a small cul-de-sac, she swayed unsteadily and saw a flashlight sitting on a pile of rocks. Its beam slowly moved across the intricate carvings that lined the walls of the room. How weakly did Sarah call out Aiden? Even though no one answered, she knew she wasn't alone. The light changed to shadow. Sarah gasped as a figure in a coat stepped out from behind the trees and turned its face toward her without making a sound. She tensed up and got ready to run away until the figure took off its hood, revealing a drawn face surrounded by a cloud of dark hair. "Sarah," said a voice that was both familiar and cracked from stress. "Thank God you're alive." "Aiden." Sarah stumbled into his ready arms and let out a sob of relief. His thin body gave off a burning heat, and his eyes sparkled brightly in a face that was hard as wax. When Sarah calmed down, Aiden led her to the light to sit down. I followed the inscriptions. There's meaning to this labyrinth if we can unravel it. He had written notes and drawings of the twisting maze all over the pages of his open notebook. When Sarah looked at the tunnels again, she saw patterns in the walls that she had only seen chaos in before. She told Aiden about her travels while he worked, putting together hints for a picture that only his sharp mind could see. He finally sat back and let out a big breath. It's a ritualistic design, built to contain. He ran out of words as horror filled his fever. Bright eyes. Sarah asked again, contain what? But she knew the answer was in the pit of her stomach. An unspoken memory came back to mind, of the statue at the center of the dark maze, and the alien patterns carved into the worn-down stone. Aiden kept his eyes on hers. This place was built to confine something inhuman. Changeling or shapeshifter of old legend. Drawn here through dark rites, but too powerful to control. so they trapped it within this ever-shifting stone prison. Sarah had a cold understanding when she saw the hunter for what he really was. And it's still here. Still. Aiden continued with a grim nod. The local lore is rooted in truth. This thing has inhabited these woods for centuries, preying on any fool enough to stumble within its grasp, and we've become its new toys to break before the coming dawn. Sarah was completely shocked by what he said. As the hunter's intelligence became clear, it looked like they had no chance of getting away. It was still playing with them, guiding its prey through a bizarre maze that they could not get out of. Not unless. She looked into Aiden's feverish eyes and asked, "You've found a way out, haven't you? There's still a chance." Aiden slowly nodded, and even though he was sick, he showed a steely determination. The long game is our only play. Can you gather your courage for one final stand, Sarah? Sarah stood up straight with new resolve as she tightly gripped her friend's cold hands. "Show me the plan." As the night got darker, they looked over Aiden's notes together and started to plan how they would finally face the darkness that was stalking the labyrinth's dark halls. The hunter could smell new blood on the wind again, and there was an awful howl outside. It was almost time for the last move in its games. As Sarah and Aiden set up their trap in the dirty orange light of a lamp, the night got longer. Aiden found an old emergency flare inside a falling arch by some strange fate or chance. Its steady light helped them come up with ways to stop the shooter who was getting closer. Aiden finally said, "Go," and pressed the flare into Sarah's shaking hands. As planned, lead it to the glade and then light the way. This is the end of my speech. Sarah gave him a tight hug, which made Aiden shiver. She begged him through his torn coat. "Promise me you'll get out of here. I couldn't stand to lose you too." Aiden looked into her eyes and smiled weakly. "Pay attention to your work, braver heart. Now run, and may luck be with the stupid." With that, Sarah jumped into the pitch, black darkness, using her sure touch to find her way down the tunnels Aiden had dug, somewhere deep in the maze. Like maze, an uncanny howl echoed her leaving. The hunter's game was getting more and more dangerous. As Sarah went around a bend, her foot caught on something and threw her to the flagstones. With her heart in her throat, she jumped up and saw two glowing orbs looking at her closely from the shadows. Bright blue flashed inside as loping footsteps closed the gap. And then the night got even darker. Sometime later, Sarah woke up to the throb of pain in her head and the smell of something familiar and musty. When she tried to bend, her bonds were cut short but wouldn't let go. She was forced to get down on all fours in front of a huge dark figure. It had two long legs that ended in black, taloned claws, and one tip flicked back and forth as it stood over its prey. Its gaping maw let out a growling snarl, and its yellowed fangs cut through its lipless smile. It knew it was almost won the game. Sarah tried very hard to look into its evil eyes. "Free my friends, please. Save their lives, and you can have me. I can't say no." It responded with a gurgling laugh as it got closer and leaned in to smell her face. "Will you make a deal with me, little morsel?" It knows that their smells are gone for good. Sarah felt scared, but she pushed it down by remembering that loved ones were waiting beyond these stones. She could no longer change the future. She only had one more chance to save the people still in the maze. "Good job. Come on, animal. I'm yours." Its cat-like grin got bigger and bigger. It still has a better game in mind, to break this mortal spirit completely. It pulled Sarah off into the night with a grunt. Sarah didn't know how long they were in the pitch. Black darkness, but her skin pricked at every sign along Aiden's path. Finally, a glimmer in the distance turned out to be faint lamplight, spilling out from a high stone glade. Inside, two stone sarcophagi stood watch as wind blew through the high walls. Aiden slowly turned to face them, his eyes twin moons, making his face look thin. He was hard to see against the light. "Sarah!" he choked. "Now!" She yanked her numb fingers free and rushed for the flare, pulling the igniter quickly. With a flash, orange light burned her eyes and drove away the darkness that would never end. Everything took place in an instant. Aiden jumped out of the way as a trap went off and a huge pile of stone and dirt surrounded the glade. From inside their new jail, howls of anger and pain cut through the air and shook the flagstones below. "It's over," Aiden whispered as he swayed back and forth. "You did it. Run now." Sarah gave him a tight hug and then quickly ran into the last few shadows of the maze, following the faint sounds of their captor's rage against the living tomb. In answer to her call, another light came on somewhere in the dark. Rescuers rushed through the crumbling entrance, pulled by Sarah's screams as dawn broke over the misty ruins. In the middle of the dark forest, two friends cuddled together, their minds finally free of the scary things that were lurking in the maze. While cracks still yawned where the hunter screamed its never-ending rage, it was once again trapped in a hell it made for itself. So the labyrinth's scary history was sealed, and its secrets were buried with the people who got lost in the stone passageways. No one knew what remains were still there in the deep woods. But for now, in the soft light dawn, everything fell silent,